Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get to our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Brittany Kohnke on the podcast. She's a personal trainer as well as a strength coach coming to us all the way from Arizona, where, I don't know. We're gonna find out in about 15 seconds if it's hotter than it is here, but I highly doubt it. This might be one of the few times where it's hotter actually up here in Minnesota than it is from Arizona. I have a couple of friends there, and they tell me, if it's under 120 degrees, that's a good day. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Brittany, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Well, now I gotta ask, what's the weather like in Arizona today?
Well, it is currently about 95. I think it's supposed to get to 99 today.
All right, so I still hold Arizona still wins. It's 90 degrees here and it feels like 102, and that's just horrible. I had a friend that I worked with who moved to Arizona. He's like, yeah, you should come down one day. And I was like, if I ever felt like just burning to death, yeah, then maybe. But I have friends that go there too, and it's just like they just can't believe how I got to ask before we get into your fitness journey, how do you survive down there? Because for me, like this one day where I looked at the weather map and it's going to be 90 for the rest of the week. So that means I'm not going outside basically until it reaches at like 10 o'clock at night. But how do you survive being that your whole summer is basically like 90 degrees almost?
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm from Chicago,
Okay.
So I'm used to humidity and awful summers. So the summers here are definitely a little bit different, but you just learn to work around it. You just don't go outside from 10 to 5 and you just work around it. It's really not that bad. It gets to a point where it just gets old, where you're like, okay, enough is enough, but you can still be active. I will take this heat over snow any day. That I do not miss the snow. I don't miss any of that.
When you're talking about things getting old, trust me, a Minnesota winter where it's all the way into, April basically, and there's still snow on the ground, it's still snowing, you're like, okay, this is just depressing. So yeah, I understand that totally. But yeah, I'm just one of those people where it's like, you get me in the low 70s, that's perfect weather for me, where you just go outside, no humidity, where, like days like yesterday, where as you can even tell from my pale skin, I can't go outside on a day like today because I'll get burnt to an absolute crisp, or I'll get farmer's tan where, farmer's tan is not a real tan. Let's be totally honest. But before we get into our weather woes, because believe me, being from Minnesota, I'm going to do a whole podcast one of these days where it's just me talking about all my crazy weather stories. And that's going to be like a 15-hour podcast. But why don't you give us your backstory on what really inspired and what really motivated you to get in shape and how that evolved to where you're at right now?
Sure. So I've always been an athlete. Growing up, I was a 3-sport athlete, volleyball, basketball, and softball, but my primary sport was softball. I played travel ball, pretty high-level travel ball, and went on and played in college. And when I was done at college, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I need to stay active somehow. So I eventually got into my first figure competition, which back then there was no bikini or anything like that. It was just figure and bodybuilding. So I did my first figure competition. And I will say, even though the experience taught me a lot, it destroyed me in a lot of ways too, much like, nowadays, a lot of women are very vocal about it. Well, this is back in 2005. No one really talked about this stuff. No one talked about rebound. Everything was about bro science. So, of course, I did it all wrong. So I took most of my 20s off from the gym. I fell into like a deep depression, eating disorder, just the whole 9 yards. And eventually, when I kind of pulled myself out of it, a friend of mine suggested, he was like, why don't you try this thing called CrossFit? I was like, what's that? So tried this thing called CrossFit and I fell in love. I loved the community. I loved how we could be competitive, but it wasn't based on like my looks or something so subjective. And through CrossFit, I was able to connect with some of the most profound coaches in my life who they taught me a lot about, working out, especially the barbell movements, powerlifting and Olympic lifting. Prior to that, I had never been, using the barbell. It was always just free weights and machines and all that. So once I got under the barbell, I was like, oh, what is this? This is awesome. And so at that gym that I was at, they had a class called Girls Gone Strong. And it was a class 2 times a week, just females teaching us how to lift, squat, bench, and deadlift, and some of the Olympic lifts. And I did that for about a year before the coach that was there running the class was like, hey, I think you should try this thing. It's called powerlifting. And I'm like, what's that? And he's like, well, you compete in the 3 lifts. You do your best 3 attempts and you get a total. And I was like, all right, that sounds fun. I'll try it. So I did it, and I ended up breaking a state record, doing really well, and I ended up getting hooked. I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. And from that point on, I've competed nationally. I've had multiple state records in multiple states. And it really became the avenue in which I then developed my own coaching business, which is to empower, especially women, to take on a journey of strength. I really feel that once I went to that other side of the spectrum where I focused on the process and I focused on what I could do instead of what I wasn't or what I was trying to look like, that everything else seemed to fall in place. Like no longer was I starving myself, no longer was I depressed and anxious and all of that. Like everything just felt so much better and healthier. And my confidence soared and everything. So that's kind of been my mission, to help others kind of get to that point where we look away from the scale, look away from, how you look, and go towards what can you do? What can you overcome? What can you accomplish?
I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, I've had some of the most in shape people on the planet on this podcast, and it's like they work 9 to 5 jobs, and it's like, well, what are you gonna do with that then? Like, what purpose
Yeah.
do you have if you can bench, like 500 pounds, if you're just gonna be like answering phone calls all day? But yeah, it's that functional thing. But I do gotta ask, because CrossFit is always something that boggles my mind. Where I'm gonna be honest, it's a cult, but it's a healthy cult. What was it? I mean, what was that like getting into that lifestyle? Because I mean, it's a whole nother world as opposed to like all these other ways that people use to get in shape.
Yeah, I was so fortunate. The gym that I was at, they only used the CrossFit name as a way to affiliate or market. They did not run CrossFit programming. They were very much about like education first. There were multiple times where they would say, no, you're not doing this, you're not ready for this, or you're doing it this way. So it was very much like, if there was any sort of CrossFit gym to have stumbled upon, it was that one. So I'm super blessed that I was able to come and cross paths with that gym. But I definitely understand that. I see the cult, throughout throughout time. I mean, this was back in 2012 that I found that. And I'll be honest, the very first CrossFit experience I had was probably maybe 6 months before then. And I don't normally tell this story because I don't want to give CrossFit a bad name, but they've already done that to themselves already. So whatever. But so the very first class I took, we were doing an overhead squat. Now, mind you, I had very little experience with a barbell, right? So we're doing an overhead squat, and I think it's for reps or whatever. So I have it up over my head, I do it. And at that time, I didn't know that it was like customary to just dump the bar. So I'm like trying to like bring it down, and my arms give out, and the bar comes crashing down on my neck. And it feels like, when you just crack your back or crack your neck, you're like, oh, okay. It kind of felt weird, but I'm okay. I'm not kidding you. A half hour later, I couldn't turn my neck. I was like, what the just happened? So I ended up getting into my doctor. I ended up fracturing my neck. I did what's called a clay shoveler's fracture. So the spinous process on your vertebrae, it had snapped off. And I was thinking to myself, like, I move fairly well. Granted, I'm not experienced, but like, there was no reason I should have had a barbell over my head doing that. Like, what dumb allowed me to do that? And, unfortunately, I think that was very common in CrossFit. And it sucks because there are a lot of great things about that community, but then a lot of just.
No, yeah, I totally agree with that. And yeah, we've had plenty of crossfitters on, and yeah, it's just like any other thing though. But I mean, yeah, that's definitely interesting. But I always say, whenever someone first gets started in the gym, I mean, so many things that really they need to basically get informed of. And the number one thing is that, if you're to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape, whether it comes down to, I mean, their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do. So many little things add up to that overall package that people end up seeing. What was that experience like for you, sort of figuring out what worked best for your body? Because I always say, if you were to walk up to someone and say, hey, what'd you train for that body part? It looks amazing. 99 times out of 100, what works best for them is not going to work as good for you.
Right. I think the biggest thing that worked for me is I found something that I truly loved, and I didn't see it as a chore. I didn't see it as something that I had to grind through. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's aspects of powerlifting and any sort of training program where you're going to have to grind through it. But I think I just really fell in love with the process of it all, and just seeing myself get stronger, and the ways that my body also changed too. I think it almost became like, oh, this is it. But I really think no matter what I would have adopted at that point, whether it was powerlifting, Olympic lifting, bodybuilding, I think I just devoted myself to, this is the process. This is the, non-negotiable thing that I'm going to be doing to keep myself healthy. And I think really in terms of anyone that's trying to get in shape, that's really what it is. You just have to devote yourself to being consistent, find something you can adhere to. So there's nothing that says, okay, if you hate powerlifting, don't do powerlifting. If you love to run, go run. I think that's the biggest misconception is people are trying to find like the one thing. There is no one thing. It's whatever you like.
I could not appreciate you more for saying that, because I have friends who all they do is they run and they're fine with it. I have friends, all they do is they work out and lift weights. It's absolutely fine, and they have different results. And I mean, you couldn't have led me perfectly more into my favorite question to ask, because I love to talk about genetics on this podcast. We talked about this briefly before we started recording, and especially in this day and age of social media where everyone's online and posting photos and everyone's looking at them and saying, oh my god, I want their arms or their abs or their back. And it's just that people do not realize that you do not have their genetics. You don't know, first of all, how they got to that look. You don't know how they maintain that look. And I mean, it's just, you can only be the best version of yourself. But that brings me into, everyone always has that one body part that really, really takes off when they start training, that, they don't have to train as much. And then everyone always has that one body part that just lags behind, that they have to train to oblivion to get it to catch up. And who knows, even if it does catch up. I'll give you my examples first, where, I worked in warehouses basically all throughout college, lifting and loading packages. So I got a really nice back. And those were, basically, if you work those jobs, you either got a really nice back or you quit. Basically, those are the two options. But I'm also 6'3", so my legs and my lower body are just absolutely shot, where, I could train legs every single day. I could inject pure muscle into my legs and calves and they wouldn't gain an ounce. I don't know how that's possible, but that's also funny. When I was talking about CrossFit, I am way too tall for CrossFit. I tried it once and I was like, yeah, 6'3" is a little too tall for CrossFit. But
Yeah.
What were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
Anyone can look at my social media. My legs are I always say I hit the genetic lottery. I am no stranger to that fact that I came across some pretty good genes as far as my legs are concerned. Now, granted, I do work hard, but I've always had big muscular legs. Ever since I was little. So, when people, especially women, come and say, how can I get your legs? Well, you can work them hard, but you have to remember, like, your legs are your legs, my legs are my legs. And then with that, like, I don't have shredded abs. I don't look like the fitness model that has a six pack. Like, it takes me dieting down really low to even start to get the resemblance of abs. It's just not how I'm, made up. And I think that, truly when you are able to understand the genetic portion or the genetic part of it, and also just how there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in this industry, that, just because someone has a six-pack abs, it doesn't mean they're healthy. It doesn't mean that they know what they're doing. That's a whole nother tangent, but yeah, I would say my abs are definitely
Well, I was gonna say too. It's like I could starve myself for a certain amount of time and I'd get abs eventually. It's not.
Yeah,
That's one
exactly.
of the. I'm gonna burst a little bubble for anyone out there who's thinking. Most of these people that you see that are super lean down and everything like that, they've starved themselves basically, and just the manipulation that they've gone through. And I'm not even going to talk about what they might be using, but also the fact that they're not going to be able to maintain that. They take that photo normally the next day. They'll barely see any of those abs left. And the fact that those photos, let's be honest, are not going to be 100% authentic most of the time. Now, I have met one of those 1% genetic freaks where, they can eat 10 Snickers bars in a day and they won't gain an ounce of muscle. And I hate them more than life itself. I even tell them, I was like, just get off my podcast. I don't want to talk to you anymore because you're just embarrassing me. I have a friend who's just like that. And I hope that this is just God playing a really cruel joke on him. He's going to wake up one day 150 pounds overweight just magically. But, unless that doesn't happen, I'm just making sure that I'm going to be okay with that. But we were also talking about this before. The number one myth and stereotype that I love to bust on this podcast, and you get this probably all the time too as a personal trainer. It's gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram and other things, but there are still so many women that have that fear that if they walk into the gym and they pick up one weight, they're going to put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight. Did you ever have that fear? And even if you didn't, how do you like to respond to that? Because I bet you hear that all the time.
Yeah, I actually never had that fear. I always wanted to aspire to the women on the old Oxygen magazines and Fitness RX, like the Monica Brandts and all that. However, I will say, even as someone in the industry, I have women that look at me and they say, I don't want to be that muscular. And I want to say, you know what? I've been an athlete literally my whole life. you won't be like this until you put, 20 years under your belt. So with that, yeah, it's such a huge myth. And I wish that I knew how to train when I was younger, like I do now, because I think I really would have circumvented a lot of the crap that I went through. I mean, for example, I talked about that first figure show. Yeah, I had abs, I was lean, but I was a mess. I was such a huge mess, and I rebound so bad afterwards. I mean, I competed at, I think I was like 112, and within 5 months, I was up to 170. Like it was that bad, and no one talked about that at that time. So I will say I think that social media, even though it does have a lot of negative that happens with it, it does bring a lot of positive too. And I think that is for us women that, what, you can be muscular and you can be strong, and that's okay. Like you should celebrate that. I think we are starting to get away from that, like skinny is in and, all of that. But either way, no matter what you look like, lifting weights, it has so many benefits besides the physical. I think women really need to lift weights. I know one girl, she's not my client, but she's in this community. She has, I can't remember the name of the disease, but basically it's like, it's osteopenia. So where like her bone starts to basically break down. It's through powerlifting that she stopped that rate of breakdown just by lifting weights. So I mean, I think if you start to look beyond the physical, you'll notice that there's even more of a host of benefits that women can get.
Absolutely. I mean, we had another guest on here that had MS, and the MS hasn't progressed since she started. Well, she was already lifting weights, but then she really, she did a test like a year ago, and they're like, hey, you haven't progressed at all in it, and you're still able to do things, and that's just amazing in and of itself. And I mean, again, you're leading me perfectly into the next question, where I mean, I say there's so many positive things that happen when you start working out, but the one thing that I think impacts women so much more positively than men, I mean, it impacts men as well, but not as much, as just the confidence boost that it gives you. I mean, we have heard hundreds of stories on this podcast of women who have, they've either made life-changing decisions, it's helped them become more assertive, or it's just helped them benefit their overall life. And I always say that's the one thing that you can take from the gym and use to impact every single aspect of your life is the confidence boost. How have you taken that confidence boost that you got from working out and used that to impact your life?
I've been working out, powerlifting for almost 5 years now. But I will say this: last year, I found myself in a situation, in a relationship where I was being manipulated. I had some mental abuse that was going on, and it was through the prep of Raw Nationals for powerlifting, basically that entire year, that really helped keep me sane. Now, don't misunderstand, like I'm still going through some of the fallout from that whole situation, but I really do believe that it was through lifting and just my routine that I could have went down a very, very dark path, but it was kind of, staying on track for prep and just focusing on what I could do and what I could control that helped me get out of that situation. And I don't think I would have gotten out of that situation had I not already had the confidence and the strength built up prior to that. That's another thing I like to talk about, especially with some of my women clients, is, this is confidence that no one can take away from you. No man, no society, no nothing. So it's something that, again, a very overlooked trait, I think, that strength training brings to a lot of women.
Well, it's just like, I also like to talk with the bodybuilders too. I mean, it's just like how so many people don't understand that this mental game is so much more heavy and so much more strenuous than the physical gains, because you can convince your body to work out, but the mental ass side of it is so much harder. But I mean, when you're going into powerlifting, I mean, there are a lot of myths about powerlifting as well, because I think just because of, what the culture is brought up is that when a lot of people think about powerlifters, they think about these big, like 400-pound guys that are just, they can barely fit in through a door, but that's not the case at all. I mean, I've had powerlifters on here that are, I had one lady who was like 100 pounds, and she was like small. She wasn't like super skinny or whatever, but I mean, they come in all shapes and sizes. But what was one myth that you might have had about powerlifting that was broken once you started it?
So I'll be honest, I thought powerlifting was for, like, I hate to say it, fat, strong people.
Yep.
Like, I was just like, well, okay, well, I'll just see what it's like. And then once I got into the sport and started to really like follow, I was like, oh no, you don't have to, you can still look a certain way, and perform. Like, it is possible. And I think that's what's starting to emerge out of the sport itself, is that you don't have to. Now, I'm not saying like I'm all for body acceptance. Like, you do you know, however you want to be. But for me, it's always been like, I still want to look a certain way. I still want to feel good about the way that I look, but I want to be able to perform at my best as well. And I think that's probably been the biggest thing that has come out of the sport lately, is that you're starting to see this new emergence, especially for females. You know, you have people like, Marissa Inda. She's a prime example. Like, you can still be lean and look good and lift some serious weight.
Well, yeah, we have, I think, one girl that I've been trying to get on the podcast, and she's all the way from Minnesota, is Amanda Lawrence. She's like she's like the national champion. She's like 22 years old,
Mm-hmm.
so she's making me feel old because I'm 25, and I think she just like squatted yesterday like 565 pounds. I'm just like, just why? Like, what? Like that? It's just so. But I mean, it's just so inspired. Yeah, they come in all shapes and sizes too, and I mean, just to even prove that, you can. Doesn't matter how you look. I mean, when I was playing football in high school, we had one of the Minnesota Vikings offensive linemen come in, and he outran most of our running backs in the 40-yard dash. Just because, I mean, those football players though, they're like 350 pounds, but they're like all they I don't know how they look fat, but like they're just I don't get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that just shows that it doesn't matter. But yeah, it's just so fascinating. And yeah, I can remember the one time that I saw. Also, we had another woman at my gym in college who was about like 100 pounds. She looked really skinny. She had like really frail arms, and then she came in and she was like she was dead. She was benching like 180 pounds, and everyone was just like what is this? Like what the hell's going on? Like what's going
Yeah.
on? So it just proves that. But also when it comes to powerlifting, I mean, you don't, obviously it's a completely different thing from bodybuilding in the fact that you don't have to watch your nutrition as much, but there are a lot of nutritional changes that you have to make. What would you say were probably one of the bigger nutritional changes that you made when you really started to take powerlifting seriously?
Well, I mean, the first and foremost is, if you're going to cut into a weight class, like, you have to be diligent about what you're eating, you know? For me, I made the decision to go USAPL 3 years ago. No, 2.5 years ago. So I had to cut into my class. So that means, tracking everything. But I will say, I kind of revamped the way that I look at food. Food to me is fuel. So I know if I'm going to go have McDonald's, like, I'm probably going to feel like shit for a few days, or I might not perform as well. So it's kind of this give and take. So, I mean, other than just the whole, clean versus dirty food, I guess, really for me, it's just kind of like making sure I get adequate amounts of protein, really focusing on my micronutrients, so tons of fruits and veggies, and just trying to really focus in on as many nutrients as I can.
Yeah, I mean, I started like counting calories like a couple of years before I started this podcast, and there's just so many different fads that so many people have to look into, and it's, again, I honestly have been thinking about just renaming this podcast to Trial and Error, because that's, if powerlifting, bodybuilding, it applies to everything and basically just everything in life, but just the stuff that you have to figure out, and it's a time process. And I always say that's why people in my generation, powerlifting or bodybuilding might not be your best option, because everyone in my generation, they want everything now and they want it yesterday, basically. So, I mean, the putting in that work and that effort might not be the thing that might be the best for them, but I always say probably the biggest thing that I would have never guessed in a million years does the most when for your recovery, it does the most really for your growth, is sleep. I mean,
Yeah.
trust me, being a college student and having all those all-nighters, and I mean, still, even sometimes to this day, like 2 weeks ago, I was editing podcasts all night. Next thing I know, I looked at my clock and I was like, holy crap, it's 7:30 in the morning. I didn't even realize it. Yeah, I had a few of those nights, but I mean, sleep is just, there's the biggest difference in the world between even getting like 6 hours of sleep to 8 hours of sleep when it comes to
Yeah.
working out. I've always said that I'm one of those people where if I get less than 6 hours, I honestly just don't even work out that day, because I can't. I mean,
Yeah.
I just can't do it. But what is your sleep schedule like, and what are some tips and tricks that you might use in order to get a good amount of sleep? Because some people really do struggle with that, but they're able to pull through, but then they go crazy.
Yeah, for me, I do try to get 8 hours. Currently going through a bit of a sleep issue myself, but normally it's 8 hours. And kind of my sleep routine is, turn the phone off, turn everything off about an hour and a half prior to. And I really like to just decompress by either reading, just listening to like easy music, whatever it may be, something to just like quiet my mind. I'm constantly on the go, constantly on the go. So anything that I can do to just kind of like bring myself down, I try to do. I do notice that if my apartment's really hot, I'll get sleep. So I often have my AC like blasting. And yeah, I think that would be my best ones.
I mean, I can't. Yeah, if it's hot, there's no way I'm sleeping. I just can't sleep.
No.
I mean, I'm one of those crazy people where me and my dad are similar. Where if it's negative 20 degrees outside in the winter, we sometimes still have our windows open when we're sleeping, just because that's the only way that we can sleep is we got to be cold. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just in our blood. So it's crazy
The
enough.
Minnesota
Crazy
in
enough.
you.
Yep. I mean, we're just a different breed of people, I guess. But I mean, yeah, just the sleep aspect is just so fascinating. But I mean, for me too, I struggled the most because, during this quarantine, I've been furloughed and I normally work nights. So and I have one of the most flexible jobs ever where I'm either getting off at 10 o'clock at night or up to 2 in the morning. It just depends on the work that we get. I'm at UPS. And so literally during this quarantine, my sleep schedule is basically go to sleep at around 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and then like today, I got up at 2 hours before we started recording this podcast at 1 o'clock. So yeah, I'm still at home
Yeah.
with my parents until this quarantine's out, and then I have a place with some friends. But my parents are loving that, having me sleep in that
Yeah.
late. Well, they're both working because they have at home jobs that they can do. But so yeah, we're getting along great with that. But so it's just fascinating, that sleep aspect. But also, I mean, one of the things that I love about powerlifting is the fact that it's a whole different, I think, mindset when it comes to doing things, because with bodybuilding, I mean, it's all about finding that perfect amount of, like I need to get this amount of rest, I need to do this amount of cardio, I need to do this amount of carbs, and it's just everything. Where powerlifting is more, you're just trying to reach one goal. What was that mindset change like for you as opposed to when you were starting in figure as opposed to going into powerlifting?
Well, I think I approached figure in the completely wrong way too. I was trying to fit a mold, whether that mold was me trying to be skinny or me trying to be muscular, I was trying to fit a mold that wasn't me. And where I think I really strive in powerlifting is I've never looked at anyone else. And even still to this day, like I don't compete against other people, I compete against myself. So anytime I go to a meet, there's numbers that I want to hit. And if I don't hit them, then that's on me. And I take the time to sit and reflect and say, okay, what went wrong? But I think you hit the nail on the head, is like with bodybuilding, there's so many things that come into play, whether it's from the prep itself, your nutrition, blah, 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 to what does your suit look like? Who's the judges that are there? Whatever it may be. Whereas powerlifting, it's like you have 3 lifts to do those 3 lifts, and that's it. So for me, I think for powerlifting, it was me being able to just focus in on this is what I have to do. This is how I have to get there. Now I just do the work and do it.
Yeah. And I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself, but my favorite thing about powerlifting is smelling salt, because I am one of those people where that is just the most fascinating thing for me, where it's like, when I say smelling salt, I think of like those old movies from like the 70s or 80s of people getting football injuries and then they go and they have smelling salt on the sideline to wake them up. But how that got into powerlifting, I don't understand. But have you ever done smelling salt before a myth? Have you ever done smelling salt before a lift?
I think I'm the rarity. I've never even tried them. I mean, obviously I've had people around me do them, but I've never tried. It just never has appealed to me. I'm one of those lifters that people kind of make fun of me when I'm at a meet. I've got my headphones on. I'm like in my zone, like my close circle knows, like, don't talk to me. Don't say anything to me. I'm just like focused in. I have my own little routine that I go through in my head, my own little visualization, and that's it. Like I don't need outside things to help kind of get me pumped up.
Yeah, I have never tried it myself, but during one of these podcasts, I think eventually I am. I know one guy who does a powerlifting podcast, and before every podcast, he does smelling salt to get himself psyched up before the guest. And I was like, okay, I don't know if I need. You can already tell that I'm a pretty energetic person, so I don't know if I need that level of energy. That things are definitely gonna go off the rails then. But yeah, it's just different ways to. And I mean, I always don't understand those videos that they have of people like basically just clobbering people in the back before a lift, just like patting them. I'd be one of those people where I'd get pissed off and I'd be like, okay, I don't want to lift now because like my back is all. So yeah, I mean, there's so many different types of people when it comes to powerlifting, but also when it comes to this coronavirus, because I love to bring this up because I mean, especially being a personal trainer, this has probably impacted you a lot more than most other people's jobs. But how have you been dealing with this outbreak? And I mean, it's unfortunate that it's disrupted so many things, but how have you been dealing with it?
I think I'm one of the rarities. So first of all, I also am a full-time high school PE teacher. So I have my personal training business on the side, and then I'm a high school PE teacher. But when this all started, I was in England for 2 weeks prior to us getting quarantined. Like I literally got on the plane the day before they shut everything down. So like I made it back just in the nick of time. So I went right into quarantine right after that vacation. So it's kind of been a whirlwind of like, here I am, like living my best life in England, not a care in the world, to coming back to like chaos. So I've been in basically lockdown for 4 months, where it's been a big, I think, just shift mentally for me, because I'm constantly like, go to school, go to the gym, do this, do that. And now it's like I'm at home all the time. So that part has been challenging. But as far as like my training business, all of my stuff is online. So I've not been impacted at all financially by it. I've actually gained a few people from it. So I'm kind of one of those fortunate souls. But I know there's a ton of people that, the rug's being pulled out from underneath them. Arizona just shut down the gyms again for 30 days. So I know that there's more people that probably won't make it out this second time. But I also know that there's a lot of gyms, like one of the big corporate gyms, he just had a press conference yesterday and basically told our governor to go off. He's not closing. So I know there's a lot of people that
we'll see how that ends out.
yeah, exactly. But this has been a weird time. I think there's been some good that has come out of it, in that, it allows people to maybe just stop for a second. I think we're a society that's like constantly on the go. But unfortunately, I think there's a lot of bad that's come out of it too, as far as people's livelihoods, and it's sad.
Well, I'm from Minnesota too, so I'm just gonna say that. So believe me, I know all the stuff that's been going on. I get it. Yeah, but anyway, I mean, it's so just mind altering and stuff. But yeah, I gotta say too, I've benefited a little bit. I mean, more people are watching the podcast now because they have more stuff to do, and let's be honest, I'm not going to have people in person. So, it's also impacted me in a positive way. But I got to ask, being a teacher too, I mean, I have so many friends that, either kindergarten teachers, special ed teachers, sixth grade teachers, and they've just been talking about how this has just completely messed everything up where they do online learning. But for PE, have you been connecting at all with before this graduation happened? Because I don't know if Arizona, because some states have different graduation dates, but before graduation, were you connecting at all with the students? Because I think it would be kind of hard to teach a PE class online to your students.
Yeah, so our district, pretty much like most of the other schools, were kind of like, all right, figure out how you want to do this. So for us, it was pretty much, we just gave students like an activity log that said, here, fill out what you did for activity. So it was a very like, generic vanilla type interaction with a lot of my kids. How this next school year is going to look, I don't know. I have a strong feeling we're going to be back online. So I don't know if things will change in that way, if we'll be asked to do some sort of like, virtual class or whatever it may be. But yeah, it was definitely not ideal by any means. And, it really just hurts the kids when you really think about it. But I don't know what the solution is either, because you have two sides of the camp. Whatever side you're on, you're not going to appease the other side. So.
I mean, I always just thought it's like those poor seniors not even going through prom, not even going through. Yeah. I mean, mostly like in Minnesota, they missed the entire baseball season. They're not. I mean, it's just, it's.
I mean, imagine being in your senior year and you don't have a season.
Yeah.
Like that would be awful.
That would be absolutely horrible. But I'm just gonna say it straight out. I don't care what else happens as long as the NFL is back this year. I could care less. That's the only thing I care about at this point right now. It's like, as long as I get to watch the Vikings, as long as there's football back, I don't even care if college football is back or not. Now, I would love it if college football is back, but just give me the NFL, give me something. Because I know they got sports coming back in about a month from now, but who knows how that's gonna go. But it's just give me one thing, and that's the only thing I'm really asking for. But two of the things that I love to talk about when it comes to adapting a healthy and strong lifestyle is that there's so many positives that happen to me, but the one negative thing is that you're gonna get asked to move a lot of people's furniture. You're going to get asked to open a lot of pickle jars or bottled water. You're basically the go-to strength person. I mean, still being at home with my parents, anytime we go out for groceries, I basically have to lift the car into the driveway and carrying the groceries myself, being the good son that I am. Has that been a similar experience with you, where people just take one look at you, or they know that you're a powerlifter and they just say, oh, hey, Brittany, you can go do this?
No, I think I get the girl card pulled on me, so they're like, oh, I'll get it. I'll get the groceries. I'll get this.
That's why I hate having some of the women on this podcast, because yeah, you can pull the girl, and then like half these, or I'd say like a fourth of these guests on here are stronger than even me. So then it's like, and I'm 6'3", so it's like, and they're, oh no, they don't have to ask. But yeah, I always said being 6'3", it's a double-edged sword, because I could have zero muscle at all, and they'd be like, oh, tall guy, come and help us. So
Yeah.
that's something that I've had to deal with. But yeah, it's just always evolving. But if someone were to walk up to you and say, Brittany, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the sport of powerlifting and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
Whew. I think there's still this sense of like, I hate to say this, but I'm going to say ego within the sport. There's very much this like alpha complex in the sport. And I would like to see that go away, because at the end of the day, like, it should be about everyone's personal journey to just better themselves. Like, this whole, and I think a lot of it is due to social media, this whole like need to be the best, need to stand out. Like, who are we kidding? No one's doing powerlifting to make millions of dollars. No one, like, what are you trying to prove by being that way? So I think if we can make it a little bit more inclusive and community driven, I think that would be awesome. I will say this, on our state level, there's a lot of great people that kind of foster that aspect of community and inclusiveness. I've been in other states and on the national level where might not be as so, but yeah, I think that would be my biggest thing, is to take away that kind of alpha complex from the sport.
Oh yeah, and I just gotta say this out front, just because you can lift weights does not mean that you're alpha. I don't know how many times I have to tell this to guys.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
I've
And
met some of the
and
most.
just because you can lift weights, that doesn't mean you're healthy. That doesn't mean you're a good person. That doesn't mean you're giving back. I think that there's a lot of things that people miss. And it's actually something that I'm starting to go down in my own personal journey of like, yeah, I might be physically strong and healthy, but like, where am I lacking in some of my other areas? Like, where am I emotionally? Where am I mentally? Where am I spiritually? Because I can be up here physically, but if I'm down here and all the rest of them, like, what does it matter? Um, so yeah.
Absolutely. And a question that I ask all the personal trainers, and I already know what your answer is going to be, because a lot of times the number one thing that they get from potential clients is, oh, I don't have the time. I can't do it because I don't have time. Now there's not an excuse for that at all. I mean, now everyone has time basically. But what advice do you like to give people just to get started working out? Because I find, there's so many people, the vast, vast, vast majority of people want to get in better shape. They just don't have the knowledge of how to do it. And a lot of people be willing to get in shape if they just knew how to do it. But I always figure, just getting started for so many people, just taking that first step. I always say, once you take that first step into the gym, it is so hard to not walk out of that gym without getting a workout done. But what advice do you have for people just to get started trying to adapt a healthy and fit lifestyle? Because let's be honest, you have all the time in the world now to get started.
Yeah, I would say that there's a couple points of advice I would give. One, keep it simple. Like, literally, the basics have been around for a while because it works. Don't underestimate the power of walking or just moving. When you are just getting started, like, literally, the sea is at your disposal of methods that you can try. So pick one and just be consistent with it. But two, don't be afraid to invest in yourself. And I know that that's probably like a bad thing to say given the times that we're in, but the investment in yourself is something that will always, always pay out a return. So whether that investment is, some sort of like pre-designed program or a book or investing in a trainer, whatever it may be, like, invest in yourself. And I feel like for a lot of people, that beginning, like that first step, is they're so overwhelmed, they don't know where to start. Investing in yourself by doing that will help minimize that overwhelm, because let's be honest, fitness is not hard. It's not complicated. We just have made it complicated by all the mass amounts of choices out there. Um,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, every day there's 1,000 new ways on how to get in shape. When I mean, there have been ways since the beginning of time that people have used to get in shape. I mean, I totally agree with you. Where I mean, I've met some Rambos that try to go out there and then they work out, for 3 hours a day for 2 weeks, and the next thing you know, their body's just dead, and then they're
yeah.
like, oh, I'm not going to do that ever again. So then they're not working out anymore. And I always tell people, it's like, if just start walking. That's the least thing that you can do, and it's I mean, I've had people on here that have, got started and they lost like 40 pounds over like 3 or 4 months of just walking. That's all you got to
Yeah.
do. And I mean, it's just so easy. But yeah, and obviously with most things closed, I mean, if you aren't a healthy person, most likely you're not going to have exercise equipment in your house. So you're not going to have any way to get in shape. So I'd say just start walking, and yeah, just know that you got to be in it for the long haul. It's not going to happen magically
Yeah.
overnight. But again, if it does happen magically overnight, give me your number and I will, come and talk to you, because I definitely want to know that secret. But if we were to talk to you a year from today, where would you like to be at in your powerlifting? Where would you like to be at in your average overall life? What are some goals that you would like to have achieved if we were to talk to you a year from today?
So as far as powerlifting, I mean, I've pretty much made it apparent that it's this year is an off year. I don't know where I'll be next year, to be honest. I'm trying to just kind of like keep that in the background, since last year was such a hard year for me, with prep and everything. But I would say a year from now, I hope to just continue to expand my business. I would like to develop a brand based around some of the core values and beliefs that I have, as far as what strength really is, and how to cultivate that in every aspect of one's life. So I hope if you talk to me in a year from now, I'll have all those details figured out, and who knows, maybe be able to leave teaching one day and, pursue this full time.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And other than, your Instagram, do you have a website or anything that people can go to if they're
Yeah.
interested in your
So,
stuff?
BrittanyKohnkeTraining.com is my website. I'm on Facebook too, Instagram. Just type in my name, and I should pop up.
All right. Well, that sounds good. And I'll leave a link to all that stuff down below. I will give you everyone a heads up that if you go and follow her on Instagram, you will be inspired to get off the couch and stop eating all those Twinkies and, get in shape. I mean, that's a warning ahead of time. But again, Brittany, we cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast and for sharing your journey. And I really, really appreciate it. And I wish you nothing but the best.
Oh, thank you so much, Ryan. It was a pleasure to be on.
Absolutely. Well, again, everyone, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. If it's really, really hot outside, go get something cool to drink. Go out and try to enjoy it. But I'm gonna see. I'm just thankful that my computer hasn't melted away from all this heat. But again, you guys, everyone, have a great day.